So ESG had been around. It had been coined, actually, the term in 2004 in a UN paper called Who Cares Wins. But really, Wall Street took notice, right after, they're trying to stand up after getting totally beaten up from the great financial crisis. And they're desperate for anything to improve their image, to regain customer loyalty.
Right.
And so that's where you see a pivot, where now mainstream institutions buy into this. Is it genuine? I don't think so.
Desiree Fixler is a leading expert in the field of sustainable finance. She has held senior roles at JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank, where she built and managed ESG investing and structured credit businesses. More recently, however, she has made a name for herself in exposing the dark side of ESG, which is an investing principle that prioritizes environmental issues, social issues, and corporate governance. She showed great courage and put her professional career at risk by bringing attention to the huge disparities between public ESG claims and internal statements and actions. Desiree, welcome to my program. I want to thank you for being here. You and I met at an event in London, and then later we met coincidentally in Miami. And I will tell you that I asked you to come here so that you can talk to me about ESG, environmental and social governance. The reason why I'm interested in this acronym is because of its parallels with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and its roots in this, I think of it as a scam. I first read Vivek Ramaswamy's book, Woke Inc., and I walked away from that book thinking, this is a scam, but we need to understand it better. And so very grateful that you're here. Before we dive into the conversation about ESG, I would like to get to know you a bit better, and for the audience to know, who are you and why are you qualified to talk about ESG?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I have to say that I've been following you for so long. I was so excited to hear you speak in London, where we first met. And I had recently read, an article that resonated so deeply with me. And you were writing about the subversion of Western values. And I was reading it, and it was very much focused from a cultural, from a political angle. And then I thought to myself, my goodness, what's missing here is the financial, economic, corporate angle, because that's what I've seen. And that's my mission right now, is to counter this subversion, to undermine capitalism in our system.
This is perfect, because I think in order to move forward on uncovering the subversive efforts, it's very important for us to have a clear picture. And when I say a picture, I mean a clear big picture, the whole picture. And so tell me a little bit more about how you came across ESG, I mean, your background.
So I did my full degree at the London School of Economics. I'm a New Yorker, born and raised, and decided to go on an adventure and study in England. Upon graduation from the LSE, like many others, I went into the field of investment banking. And, my career was very typical, linear, but it was 2005, my best friend sent me a book. And it was called Banker to the Poor by Dr. Muhammad Yunus. Mm-hmm. And it made the case that you can do good and do well. So Dr. Yunus was looking at scaling microfinance. And I read this book, and it really, it totally kind of like blew up my world. And it just seemed so logical that, this was a concept of socially responsible investing, impact investing. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I could use my financial skills. And instead of just like, we're all just focused on our big bonuses, I could do both. I could, earn a good living, but also make a positive impact, both socially and environmentally. Now, please note that, my friend sent the book, but she followed up with a phone call and said, Desiree, you have to read it, and you have to read it immediately because you're turning into an asshole. And, I was just so one-tracked in this banking world, in my bubble. And I did. It was a wake-up call, and I thought, I need more in life. I need more purpose. That's what drew me to ESG impact investing.
And that resonates with me and a lot of people our age. You and I I'm 2 years older than you. Where when I went to university in Leiden, I remember young people who wanted to go into the private sector worrying too much about them turning out into cold assholes, as you said. And so there was a lot of marketing about doing well and doing better, improving people's world. And I also remember the reputation of Eunice microfinancing, and it left, a feel-good thing about us. So where does all of these win-win, doing good and doing better, where does it lead to what you uncovered later?
So unfortunately, I guess I have to start off and say, I do believe in development finance. I do believe that Wall Street serves an integral purpose. So I'm not discouraged about it. I just believe Wall Street is also prone to excess.
Now, for people who don't know what development finance is, what exactly does that mean?
Oh, just how we all develop, just, developing infrastructure, right? So it's everything from public transportation to affordable energy. So every economy needs investment, local and sometimes foreign investment. And so that was a big draw for me, to help lower income countries, help raise money from the institutional markets in the West, and bring it to the global South to develop key infrastructure.
And that is in addition to the taxpayer money that we pay as a percentage of the GDP to
Correct.
The Ministry of Development.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm a firm believer that these investments need to stand on their own commercial legs.
Okay.
Right? So this is absolutely that. At times you will need some direction, some catalytic capital from development agencies, but for the most part, that is supposed to mobilize private capital. And that's what I specialized in. So I am still a big believer in that. That's what drew me to ESG. However, by year 2020, it had become so mainstream. And that's what I stumbled on.
You were working, at the time you were working for a bank.
Yes, I was working at Deutsche Bank's asset management company called DWS.
And what does DWS stand for?
I don't know.
It's probably German. Yeah,
it is Deutsche. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but it was the subsidiary Deutsche Asset Management.
Yeah,
and in German DWS.
Yeah, DWS.
Oh my goodness, again, I had transitioned from being mainstream investment banker, and in the mid-2000s, I moved into, impact investing. That was a main thread of my career, and it culminated in a dream job in the year 2020. I was going to be a chief sustainability officer, a head of ESG. I was reporting directly to the CEO, and the company had almost $1 trillion of assets under management. And I thought to myself, my goodness, how much impact, we could do. But I was looking at it, again, I'm firmly a commercial person. I'm a believer in capitalism and Milton Friedman. But I still had, at that time, I had transitioned, and again, I have to call myself out. There was almost like a change in me. There was almost like a religious zeal that I was doing good. I felt so proud that I was in this position. I had almost $1 trillion of assets under management, and I could do good with it.
And good is defined as?
Well, at the time, we were defining it as positive environmental and social impact. So that was everything from confronting climate change, mitigating biodiversity loss, making the workforce fairer, of course, diversity and inclusion. So these were the big topics. It was by and large to confront climate change and inequality. And we could use private sector money to solve all of these global issues. And the truth is, I didn't have that feeling before. But once you jump into this field, and especially once ESG took off, you're on the main stage. Yeah. It really goes to your head. And there's this arrogance that comes with it. And so at this time, I'm not just thrilled that I have this high-paying, very high-profile job, but I'm gonna do good, right? I'm better than others.
Yeah, you're changing the world for the better.
Yeah.
So in what way do you then, in that euphoric, mindset of wanting to change the world, relate to your customers, the shareholders? Because the $1 trillion comes from somewhere, and they're expecting a profit. So, how does that factor in?
So, interestingly, that brings us to what is ESG? What is sustainable finance? And what's interesting is that the general definition is about investing in a sustainable world. Now, that is a very ambiguous definition. And the masters that created ESG purposely did that, I believe. I believe there's intentional conflation.
Yeah.
So for example, Greta Thunberg or Greenpeace activists, it does mean climate action. It does mean saving the planet and saving people.
So they're sincere in what they're doing.
There's an activist element to it. Now, ESG can also mean for Wall Street, because, again, this is how it's been rebranded. It's all about different language, that it means astute risk management. It means that you acknowledge a changing world because of climate change, because of consumer preference changes, i.e. millennials and Gen Zers, regulatory changes. And you're now, as a CEO of a corporation, you're more progressive, and you are managing your company to risk manage for these changes. So you're actually optimizing the profits of your company. So ESG, as you see, and it doesn't make any sense because it has these two very different definitions. Mm-hmm. One is saving the world, that we're going to go out there, it's a crusade. Yeah. And the other one is about actually optimizing profitability.
Yeah, for shareholders.
Yes.
And are the shareholders in on this? To what extent do they know?
Well, I think the game is up. Right?
It's up now. It's up now, but it wasn't up when you are one of the people. You're a whistleblower.
Yes,
you helped draw attention to this. Now, these ambiguities, you said it is on purpose, and is it on purpose to give the leadership in, for instance, Deutsche Bank, the freedom to mitigate for risk, or is it, intentionally vague to do things that they shouldn't be doing? I mean,
I think it's both.
I'm asking you this question because I really want us to take care not to get into conspiracy theories and
I think it's both. So on the one hand, and again, corporations have done this, for so long. We can go back to the 1940s. You have that famous movie, Miracle on 34th Street. Yeah. Mr. Macy is doing well by doing good. Yeah. So there's always been this thread of companies using social charity, philanthropy, responsible action to improve their PR.
Yeah.
There was a turning point, though, after the great financial crisis, where you've got Wall Street really beaten up. Goldman is called the blood-sucking giant vampire squid. Yeah. So Wall Street, is being blamed, right, for, so much, human suffering at that time. They almost, took down the entire world, right? Yeah. The financial markets were collapsing. Yeah. And people were outraged. And they went after, you had movements like Occupy Wall Street.
I remember that.
So you have now bankers on the defense. And, again, it went on for some time. So ESG had been around. It had been coined, actually, the term in 2004 in a UN paper called Who Cares Wins. But really, Wall Street took notice, right after, they're trying to stand up after getting totally beaten up from the great financial crisis. And they're desperate for anything to improve their image, to regain customer loyalty.
Right.
And so that's where you see a pivot, where now mainstream institutions buy into this. Is it genuine? I don't think so. At the time, I wanted to believe it was. So I'm one of them.
Right.
I bought into it.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to clarify is for Wall Street trying to find a footing after 2008, 2009, and latching onto these acronyms like ESG, they're not themselves believers in any kind of ideology. They're just driven by how do we get up and how do we win the trust of the public. That's it.
Well, it's, yes, that should be the case. But then...
well, let's call it cynicism or pragmatism, depending on who you are. And so at that point, Wall Street just wants to be pragmatic. They don't believe in the ideology of Occupy Wall Street.
No, definitely.
And they're not anti-capitalist.
No.
Okay.
But what they do is make a move, and this is where I love what Vivek Ramaswamy, what he's written, what he stands for, what he says. At the time, Wall Street grasped anything to rebrand themselves. And so, again, to your point, of course, Wall Street has to believe in capitalism, but now they shift from shareholder capitalism and they promote something called stakeholder capitalism. And so what Wall Street says is, hey, of course, we want to do good, but we are, a capitalist society. So what we're now transitioning to, we have a belief in stakeholder capitalism, where if we ensure that we're supporting and we're caring for all of our stakeholders, we'll make even more money. So you shareholders, don't worry, even though we're not only servicing you, we're going to service our employees. We're going to service, our customers. We're going to, obviously, and the community. And we're going to highlight global challenges such as climate change and diversity and inclusion issues. Don't worry, we're doing this. We can do, there are no trade-offs. It's a win-win. That's what Wall Street promoted. Win-win. We can do good and we can do well at the same time. Our bottom line, we can enhance profitability by embracing stakeholder capitalism.
Okay, I'm just listening to you, and there are two things going through my mind as I listen to you. And I think this sounds like they're dodging accountability, and there is mission drift.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so carry on. This is I wonder how they convince their shareholders to change their names to stakeholders and dodge accountability. And
Interestingly, there were two things that happened. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, came out with a seminal letter to his annual letter to investors and the CEOs of his investee companies. And it was about profit and purpose, a sense of purpose.
yeah, not profit and loss.
That happens later. Interestingly, at the same time, in the U.S., you have the Business Roundtable also coming out to say shareholder primacy is past. Today, we have to embrace stakeholder capitalism. And you have lots of CEOs jumping, including Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, signing off. But what was interesting is the mission of the companies, the purpose of the companies, and board approval never happened for the most part. So they didn't change the purpose of the corporation. They just changed their communications. They changed their marketing spiel.
Public relations.
That's right. But again, at this time, I am still a true believer.
Yeah.
Right? I'm promoting this stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I get my dream job. And you have the backdrop of I get the job as the Chief Sustainability Officer in 2020. The backdrop, of course, is COVID is raging. You have Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
You have, again, a similar situation. And that's what I felt, that CEOs felt on the back foot. It was just like right after the GFC.
They had nothing to do with the instigation of that. They were caught, you're saying, flat-footed by all that social unrest and culture wars and all the rest of it.
And they wanted to protect themselves. And so they all, one after another, jumped on this bandwagon. And that's where you see this whole shift in society from ESG going from kind of, a niche area, in finance to now becoming mainstream, not just in finance, but throughout like all industry, where every leading CEO is making statements that the sense of purpose, like profit, has to come with a separate purpose.
Yeah.
And they have missions that are either social, they have missions that are environmental, or both. And so there's this total change to this collectivist vibe that they were all about doing good in the world. So you have this like as a backdrop to when I'm joining, and really this becomes almost the pinnacle of the market, where there's almost ESG hysteria.
Right.
And at the time, I do believe that some CEOs maybe thought they believed in this, that you could marry purpose and profit. I think that some CEOs recognize this is a great arbitrage. This is the best marketing campaign. We can just change all labels and change labels to climate action and diversity and charge higher fees.
And everybody will look away.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. We can make statements and it will distract people from all the the nonsense shenanigans or bad stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For all of those reasons, this was the greatest thing since sliced bread.
So the quarterly reports of these companies, are they actually showing profit?
So the answer is yes. And again...
And where's this profit coming from?
Well, because it resonated with investors. So you have investors that are so excited that they can, use their money and they can make more profits than ever, and they can do good. They can change the world. So you see that Wall Street mobilizes trillions of dollars into ESG investment products.
And is this coming just from investors, or is also government taxpayer money flowing into
So it
ESG?
It is both, because you have, of course, government agencies investing and moving hugely into climate action, and it's just private capital. But, please note, in that private capital bucket, of course, you're talking about pension funds, which is that's what we contribute to.
Yes.
So regular teachers, there are two things. There are public pension funds and there are private pension funds. Well, that money, that's like a big chunk of the trillions flowing into ESG investing. And again, the strap line is, you can, do good and do well. It's a win-win. And of course, and it comes with, it pulls at it's warm and fuzzy, and it makes you feel good when you see all their marketing about changing the world, saving the world.
Yeah.
And people sign up for that, as, by the way, as I did. I was promoting this stuff.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now suddenly I'm at the board level. I'm sitting there, I'm reporting directly to the CEO. And, I'm looking under the hood at all the billions that we're issuing, right? Yeah. So we're creating products that have labels like Sustainable Development Goal Equity Fund.
Right.
We're here to support the 17 UN SDGs.
Yeah.
And, this is sustainable. And what I'm recognizing when you lift the hood on these products, these aren't investments into any sort of infrastructure. These are investments into mega cap technology companies in the US. These are investments into Apple, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, all great companies.
Right.
But is this really changing the world? And then the next thing I clock, we're overcharging for this. So that's what I stumble upon, is that there was this whole marketing machine,
right?
That portrayed Deutsche Bank and DWS as having sustainability and ESG at the heart of everything we do.
And these tech companies, are they in on the conspiracy?
Oh, yeah.
Are they in on the game?
They loved it. Oh, my God. Billions are pouring in.
Yeah. And they didn't mind that they were overpaying.
Well, for the tech companies, they got the investment. So you have this whole development. So remember, this is now, we're talking about by the year 2020, you are talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industrial complex.
Right.
So everybody is in on this.
Yeah.
You've got the consultants loving this, a whole new growth area of ESG. And you've got, Wall Street, structuring different products, advising on different products. Insurance companies love it, talking up climate change, because guess what? They can raise their premiums. All these service companies, you have the rise of ESG rating agencies and data companies. Everyone is in on this.
And in the meantime, there are obviously the true believers who think that
they're changing the world.
They're
solving problems.
Yeah. So do these CEOs know that they're spending quite a lot of public relations or money on undermining capitalism?
I think that some are waking up now, and that's why, first in the U.S., that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to wake them up.
Yeah.
Because it's not innocuous. We've seen on Wall Street lots of scams. I mean, there was the whole, the GFC and the whole, prime mortgages, synthetic CDOs. You've had, the dot-com bubble, SPACs, right? So Wall Street has been prone to excess, and excess so much that it could take down the system. ESG there's something more sinister and nefarious with it, because it pretends it's this moral cloak. And what actually is happening is that, it's not just this marketing scam where Wall Street is overcharging for mislabeled social responsible or environmentally friendly products, right? It's not just that it's a marketing scam. What's happened is that it is somehow seduced capitalist Wall Street to promote ESG regulation, to promote policies, industrial policies like net zero.
Right. That's what I mean. Do they believe in this?
Well,
so they don't believe in net zero, but somehow inadvertently they have promoted the regulation of net zero. They have empowered people who actually believe in this.
absolutely.
Who are in government.
Absolutely. And net zero, like all of these movements, whether they're demographic, because I mean, there's just, also, a lot of governments are moving to, sponsor, enshrined diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And then you have all of the climate policies. Remember, what this is government control of corporate production, corporate distribution, citizen or country natural resources,
Right.
and then demographics.
Yeah.
And so suddenly you have this insane situation where Wall Street inadvertently is supporting collectivism, stakeholderism. It's the same. It is socialism because it is lessening the free enterprise capitalism. It is giving government more control. So net zero has led to true human suffering. It has driven up consumers, it's driven up energy prices.
Oh, it's scandalous. It has led to the deindustrialization of Germany. The situation in the UK is terrible. Look at what's going on in California. So, I mean, all of these things are known, and that is why I have a hard time believing that it's inadvertent. You see, I think... but you see, I don't know. And I just think, how can it be inadvertent? These people are intelligent.
Because there's so much money at stake. Short-term greed. Short-term greed, and also remember crony capitalism, right? They're in bed with government.
So this, exactly. So the crony capitalism part of it and the money sloshing around between government and corporations, we obviously know that Wall Street and that's... for capitalism to be productive, it has to be regulated. There are all sorts of accountability mechanisms that are in place. Why is that not shifting into gear? Because when I was reading your story, you appear to me as one of those people who stumbles on something and says, hang on a minute, this isn't supposed to be happening. This is outside of the rules. This is wrong. So just for those of us who don't know the corporate world, it's just one big black box. And most people actually just distrust them. Walk us through, why are these mechanisms that are in place that are supposed to check greed, why are they not kicking into action?
So regulators, particularly in the U.S., they were caught off guard. So they were just looking for regular snake oil. So ESG, remember, it was very niche. And then suddenly you have, in 2020, an explosion. So regulators were caught off guard because you do have the mobilization of trillions of dollars into the strategy.
Right.
But then, of course, I'm part of the story. I popped that green bubble, that ESG bubble.
So illustrate what you just said now with your own story.
Yep.
You believe in this stuff. You're working for Deutsche Bank, trillions of dollars in assets. You think you're doing good, but at the same time, you're also actually doing your job. And what is it that you stumble into?
So, again, I'm, U.S. trained, and there's a lot of regulation stateside. And what I'm noticing is that, first of all, we're not allowed on Wall Street. You're not allowed to mislead, misrepresent, or missell. You always have to have fair and clear disclosure, right? And that's the rule that we live by. And that was one of the biggest lessons for me, especially from the great financial crisis. You can't break the law. We always knew that.
Yeah.
But pre-crisis, we specialized on Wall Street on breaking the spirit of the law, right? That's what we loved, right? Post-crisis, we learned that lesson. Don't obviously don't break the law, but don't break the spirit of the law. So I have that mindset because I've lived through a number of bubbles and I've been in the market since 1994. So for me, it was a little bit, I've seen Wall Street, I've lived through so many of these excessive periods. And while I'm believing it, as I'm seeing it really go pop and explode and where I'm seeing all these trillions of dollars, I'm also like, you start to have a reality check where you know this is irrational exuberance.
Yeah.
There's something not right here.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, being more careful about checking things. And there's the biggest gap at our company between what we were saying externally and what we were actually doing. So externally, Deutsche Bank DWS was saying, we're a leader in sustainability. We have the most sophisticated ESG, environmental and social and governance risk assessment systems.
And it's a lie.
Well, not only is it a lie,
it's illegal.
Internally, we were saying externally, that our system is world class.
Right.
It is above industry standards. It's leading. They're all utilizing artificial intelligence. Internally, the most common word used to describe our system was the word shit. Now, it was documented there was high operational risk with the system. It was deeply flawed. In fact, most of my portfolio managers disregarded it. They were not, they ignored ESG.
And this is not a miscommunication between the public relations team, which is supposed to, they are paid to give the company a facelift, and the people who actually run things. There is no miscommunication. They're in on it together.
This was absolute intentional fraud. So they're at the table. We were, head of communications is next to me. I'm at the board meeting and saying, we have to fix this. We have misstatements out there.
And you're telling them it's illegal.
Oh, absolutely. That we're in violation.
Yeah.
The company was already on probation with the Department of Justice. So Deutsche Bank has a history of, quite a few compliance issues. So we're on probation. And so I took this very, very seriously. Now, I'm in headquarters. I'm based in Frankfurt. I reported directly to the CEO there. But it doesn't matter. A big chunk of business was still in the U.S., and that was one of our main regulators, and we were always in trouble with the U.S. And so this was a period of time where, we had to be more careful. And so I raised my voice, right, for two reasons. Number one, because the company was going to get in a lot of trouble. And the second reason is that I'd be the GIMP. I'd be the one responsible. I have to sign off on this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be signing off on these misstatements in the annual report. I can personally get in deep trouble. So,
and if you were to get into trouble, what would be the consequences for that?
In the States, you can go to jail.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they can prove that, I intentionally defrauded people. Because, again, you have these email chains, you have all these board minutes, you have all of my presentations and strategy reports, and I'm demanding this.
Yeah.
So I knew. I redlined. In fact, I redlined the annual report to say these are all misstatements.
Yeah.
This is untrue. So I wasn't... my whistleblowing wasn't some people like to look at me as this green Joan of Arc. Yeah. That wasn't it.
No.
I'm just a trained it was about corporate governance.
Yeah.
It was about this was a fraud issue. And it just so happened to be in the name of ESG. It just so happened to be the area I was responsible for. But I made my stance because we were just lying to the public. And the U.S. regulators would find out, and there'd be a hefty fine, and people would get in trouble.
And you would go to jail, and so you.
I could. That's worst case. But yes, I could personally get in trouble.
Yeah, and not only that, it would completely destroy your career because even if you didn't go to jail, you would be the GIMP who sat there and signed off on these things and didn't say anything. Yeah,
they'd get off scot-free, and I'd be the scapegoat.
So you notice this, and then do you talk to your boss?
Yes. So, of course, I raised my concerns, and it's over a period of time. And it was the weirdest thing. Nothing is happening.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking at the very beginning, there are cultural issues. I tend to be a little bit more fast-paced and decisive. In Germany, maybe there's more consensus management. So I'm always telling myself, like, sometimes you see something wrong, but you rationalize it in your head.
Yeah.
Because I want the job. I want this to work. I really want this to work. I also want to believe in ESG. I don't want to. I don't want to believe that there's intentional fraud here, that it's all BS.
Right.
So, I start kind of fibbing to myself over a few months. But the changes aren't happening. The annual report is imminently going out. And so for me, it was an urgent situation. So then I took it to the board. So now you have board members, around that big table, and it's very formal.
Yeah.
And I am far more assertive, aggressive.
Okay.
And I demand change. I demand the correction of these misstatements. I demand that we stop mismarketing. I demand we make a decision. Either we're going to just chuck out ESG or we have to do it the right way. We have to do what we say we're doing. It's one or the other.
This is thrilling. We have only 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you on a very personal level, when you do that, are you doing it in good faith? Do you expect your boss to say, good girl, you're amazing, let's correct this and recalibrate? Or what are you expecting?
No. By that time, I know he was irritated. I knew I was becoming an irritant.
Yeah.
I did expect, because I thought I had built consensus with the upper ranks internally. Mm-hmm. And because it's documented, I have risk management on my side, right? I've got heads of division on my side. It's not just me. I thought I was clever. I collaborated with others.
But they're all in on the ESG.
Well, what happens is at first they saw that there were bad things happening. We noticed there were bad eggs. Mm-hmm. What we didn't know is that the CEO is directing this. So I hear you. I wasn't naive to think that the CEO is going to say, good girl.
Yeah.
I did feel that I cornered him to have to make the changes because I had the majority of folks and it was documented. I was totally blindsided, absolutely blindsided when I was brutally fired.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe it, please?
So it happened in 2 stages. The first one was my CEO, my boss, calls me in. It was a regular meeting because we were frequently meeting. And what was bizarre is that he has 2 parts of his office. The front part has all windows so everyone can see in. And then there's like a chamber behind without windows. That was used for just Zoom calls, just the Polycom there and like the monitor. So we come in and I have some documents. It's a regular meeting. And we sit down and he pushes the documents away. And he can speak English. His English wasn't great. He can understand everything, but I can speak German, but we did speak English, and he pushed the documents away and he just said, "No good," and he said, and it flipped like this: "Everybody hates you. Nobody likes you. Yeah. Nobody likes you," and he just freaked out, and I first sat there, and I'm thinking. Because he could be a very emotive person, and he had a temper. And I'm thinking, but sometimes he would do renditions of people. He'd make fun of things. I'm thinking, is this like from a Tarantino movie or? And I remember just sitting there not reacting, and he got even angrier.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yes, you are done, head of ESG, done." And I said, "Are you firing me?" And this was bizarre. He said, "No."
So that was stage 1.
That was stage 1. Just this crazy incident. Then I go back to work, but I know something is wrong.
Is off.
And I'm expecting this, right? So it's not this. The second part doesn't it's not that surprising. But I wake up in the morning. I'm in New York because I was working in New York and Frankfurt, and I can't log on to the system. And I get an email, and my CEO hires an employment lawyer by the name of Mr. Anus, and Mr. Anus writes to me. And it's a letter to say, Mr. Anus says, dear Ms. Fixler, we've terminated your contract. The letter should be in your post box in Frankfurt. And I'm like, what? And of course, I asked for an electronic copy and where's HR? And he just said no. So I'm in this weird position where I don't know who Mr. Anus is. And it's so peculiar.
And I'm locked out.
And so no one's, I can't get in touch with anyone except a friend who's part of the investment bank. And to make a long story short, a week later, because I'm still in New York, I have to organize for him to meet with my landlord to get access into my apartment, to go to the mailbox and just look through all my mail and see, just see if there's a letter saying from a Mr. Anus or asshole, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah. See if I'm fired. And sure enough, he finds a letter. It was 2 pages to say that I was in probation period. They could fire me without cause. And a 3rd page from the Workers' Council that said this was a wrongful termination. I've been at the firm beyond probation, and it's wrongful. There's no cause, so they can't do this. So it was really bizarre. I was never fired by HR, never fired by my CEO. They just sent that letter and cut communication.
Very
so
abrupt.
Weird.
Yeah. My goodness. I want to continue. I'll say part 2. Okay. We are going to start part 2 off on this.
Okay.
Because I really want to know what happens next.
It gets wild.
It gets wild, yeah. But thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've never been shouted at by a German CEO, so I think it is in German. And he did it in German or in English?
He did it in English. In English. He did it in English.
His best English, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the rest of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.